Rebecca's car was missing for 14 years. Police had given up. Then a demolition worker broke through the wrong wall and found it hidden in perfect condition. The trunk was locked from the inside. What they found when they opened it changed everything. October 2, 2001. Cincinnati, Ohio. 19-year-old Rebecca Walsh kissed her roommate goodbye and grabbed her keys from the kitchen counter. She was driving to the grocery store in her red Honda Civic, a 10-minute trip she'd made hundreds of times before. She never came back. For 14 years, her family believed Rebecca had run away to escape a controlling ex-boyfriend. The police classified it as a voluntary missing person case. Her red Honda Civic had simply vanished along with her. But on March 15, 2015, construction worker Mike Torres swung his sledgehammer into what should have been a solid warehouse wall. Instead, he broke through into a hidden garage that would rewrite everything they thought they knew about Rebecca Walsh's disappearance. If you're into missing person mysteries, hidden discoveries, and shocking revelations that expose the truth years later, subscribe now and hit the bell icon. March 15, 2015, 2:47 p.m. Riverside Industrial District, Cincinnati. Mike Torres had been demolishing old warehouses for 15 years. The Kensington Logistics building was supposed to be a straightforward job: tear down the walls, clear the foundation, prep the lot for new construction. But when his sledgehammer struck the back wall of the loading dock, it sounded wrong. Hollow, like there was empty space behind it. I've hit enough walls to know the difference between solid concrete and drywall over a frame, Mike later told investigators. This was definitely hiding something. He called his foreman over. Together, they broke through a section big enough to see inside. Mike shined his flashlight through the hole and froze. There, perfectly preserved in a hidden garage space, was a red Honda Civic. The car was clean, dust-free, sitting on 4 inflated tires like someone had just parked it yesterday. But, according to the license plate, this was Rebecca Walsh's missing Honda, the one that had vanished 14 years ago. Mike immediately called the police. Detective Sarah Chen arrived within 20 minutes, and what she found defied every assumption about Rebecca's disappearance. The hidden garage was professionally constructed. It wasn't a hastily built hiding spot. Someone had invested serious time and money to create this space. The walls were soundproofed, the floor was painted, and there was even electrical wiring for lighting. But the most disturbing discovery was the car itself. Despite sitting hidden for 14 years, it was in perfect condition. Recent oil changes, new tires, fresh wax jock. Someone had been maintaining this vehicle regularly. Detective Chen had worked missing persons cases for 8 years, but nothing like this. The Rebecca Walsh case had been closed since 2003, filed under voluntary disappearance. Now she was looking at evidence that suggested something far more sinister. She ran the VIN number, confirmed it was Rebecca's Honda. But when she tried to open the car, she discovered something strange. The doors were locked, and the trunk was secured with an aftermarket locking mechanism that could only be opened from the inside. It was like someone had turned the car into a safe. Detective Chen said, whatever was inside, someone wanted to make sure it stayed there. The locksmith took 40 minutes to get into the trunk. When it finally popped open, Chen found herself staring at items that had been preserved for 14 years. Rebecca's purse, her cell phone from 2001, a stack of documents in plastic bags, and a small digital camera. But the most important discovery was wedged behind the spare tire, a sealed plastic container holding a USB drive and a handwritten note. The note, in Rebecca's handwriting, contained just 4 words. They know, I know. The USB drive contained files that Rebecca had been secretly copying from her part-time job at Meridian Shipping, a logistics company that handled freight transport across the Midwest. Rebecca had been working there for 6 months when she started noticing irregularities. Shipments that weren't properly documented. Trucks that arrived and departed outside normal business hours. Containers that were loaded and unloaded by workers who weren't on the company payroll. The files on the USB drive painted a picture of systematic criminal activity. Shipping manifests that didn't match cargo contents. Financial records showing payments to shell companies. And most damning of all, coded communications between Meridian management and contacts in Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland. But Rebecca had documented something even more significant. The digital camera contained photos she'd taken secretly, showing young women being loaded into shipping containers. The photos were grainy, taken from a distance, but they clearly showed human trafficking operations using Meridian as a front. Detective Chen realized she wasn't just looking at a missing person case anymore. This was evidence of a multi-state trafficking network that had been operating for over a decade, and Rebecca Walsh had been killed for trying to expose it. The investigation expanded rapidly. FBI agents joined the case, along with trafficking specialists from 3 states. Rebecca's files led them to a sophisticated operation that used legitimate shipping companies to move victims across state lines. Meridian Shipping was just one node in a larger network. The company's owner, David Kensington, had connections to similar operations in Chicago and Detroit. They used the cover of legitimate freight transport to move human cargo, with victims hidden in specially modified shipping containers. But Rebecca's evidence revealed something even more disturbing. The operation wasn't just about trafficking. It was about long-term captivity. Some victims were being held at various locations for months or years, moved periodically to avoid detection. The photos on Rebecca's camera showed at least 12 different young women over a 6-month period. All appeared to be between 16 and 25 years old. All looked terrified. Agent Maria Santos, who led the FBI task force, had seen trafficking operations before, but never one this organized. Most trafficking networks are opportunistic, she explained. They grab victims when they can and move them quickly. But this operation was systematic. They were hunting specific types of victims and holding them in a network of facilities across multiple states. Rebecca's documentation showed that the network had been operating since at least 1998, 3 years before her disappearance. But the most pressing question remained: what had happened to Rebecca herself? The evidence suggested she had been gathering information for months before her disappearance. She'd been careful, documenting everything, building a case that could bring down the entire network. But someone had discovered what she was doing. Rebecca's cell phone, preserved in the trunk for 14 years, contained text messages from the days before her disappearance. Most were routine conversations with friends, work schedules, grocery lists. But the final message, sent at 11:47 p.m. on October 1st, was different. It was sent to her roommate, Kelly. If something happens to me, check the car. I hid everything. Don't trust anyone from work. Kelly had never received that message. Phone records showed it had been intercepted before delivery. The investigation revealed that Meridian Shipping had been monitoring its employees' communications. They knew Rebecca was gathering evidence, and they'd been planning to stop her. But rather than simply killing her, they'd made her disappear in a way that wouldn't trigger a major investigation. By making it look like she'd run away voluntarily, they'd avoided the intense police scrutiny that comes with a murder case. Armed with Rebecca's evidence, law enforcement launched coordinated raids across Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois. They hit 12 locations simultaneously: shipping warehouses, storage facilities, and private residences connected to the trafficking network. At a warehouse outside Detroit, they found what they'd been looking for: evidence of long-term captivity. Modified shipping containers with living spaces inside, restraints, medical supplies, and personal belongings from dozens of victims. But they also found something else: recent evidence that people had been held there within the past few months. The operation was still active. David Kensington was arrested at his home in Cincinnati. During interrogation, he maintained his innocence, claiming Meridian was a legitimate shipping business. But when confronted with Rebecca's photos and financial records, his story began to fall apart. Rebecca Walsh was a problem, he finally admitted. She was asking too many questions, taking pictures she shouldn't have taken. We tried to scare her off, but she wouldn't listen. But Kensington insisted he hadn't killed Rebecca. According to him, she'd been moved to a secure location where she couldn't cause problems for the operation. The secure location turned out to be a farmhouse in rural Indiana, 2 hours from Cincinnati. When FBI agents arrived, they found evidence that multiple people had been held there over the years. In the basement, they discovered a room that had been occupied recently. Personal belongings, clothing, medical supplies, and on the wall, scratched into the wooden beam, were initials and dates going back 15 years. One set of initials stood out: RW 2001 to 2015. Rebecca Walsh had been alive for 14 years, held captive at various locations, moved whenever the network felt their security was threatened. The hidden garage containing her car had been their way of preserving evidence while keeping her disappearance looking voluntary. But Rebecca wasn't there anymore. According to Kensington's final confession, she had died just 6 months earlier, 6 months before her car was discovered. She never stopped fighting, Kensington said. 14 years. And she never stopped trying to escape. Never stopped telling anyone who would listen about what we were doing. In the end, she became too much of a liability. Rebecca Walsh's body was found buried on the farmhouse property. The medical examiner confirmed she had died in late 2014, just months before construction workers would discover her hidden evidence. David Kensington was sentenced to life in prison without parole. 17 other members of the trafficking network received sentences ranging from 15 years to life. The operation was dismantled, and 23 victims were recovered and reunited with their families. Rebecca's evidence, hidden for 14 years in the trunk of her Honda Civic, had finally brought down the network that killed her. But the tragedy was that she had come so close to seeing justice served. Her car now sits in an FBI evidence facility, a reminder that sometimes the truth stays hidden for years before finally coming to light. And sometimes, the bravest people are the ones who pay the ultimate price for trying to do what's right. For more stories about missing persons, hidden evidence, and the courage it takes to expose the truth, subscribe to Dark Discoveries. Because sometimes, justice takes 14 years, but it never stops coming.